by Kiresh Jahanian, and he is the Senior Innovation Manager at Commonwealth. He specializes in understanding the core problems of financially vulnerable households and exploring innovative solutions to help these households become financially secure. And then we will also today hear from Ned Castle from the Rhino Foods Foundation. This foundation works to spread innovative workplace practices that stem from a culture of employee-centered design and strengthen business. I know that this is a common challenge for many small business owners, employee engagement, and how that directly relates to the success and growth of your business. So the Rhino Foods Foundation, their primary initiative focuses on employee financial stability and the spreading of the Income Advance Program, which you will hear more about in this presentation. Ned Castle, who's joining us today, coordinates the Foundation's Technical Assistance Program for organizations exploring the implementation of small dollar loans and savings programs for their employees. So they're looking to take what they've implemented in their own organization and support other businesses and organizations in delivering the same. So again, for those of you who have just joined, please feel free to use the chat box as we go throughout the presentation to ask questions. And I will turn it over to you, Melissa.
Great. Thank you, Laura Lee, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're able to join us on this Wednesday afternoon. Hope everyone's having a good start to their new year, and hopefully this webinar will continue that trend for you. So as Laura Lee said, Commonwealth is a national mission-driven organization. I'm going to now share a deck with you so you can see what I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see this. And as Laura Lee said, myself, Melissa Gopnik, and my colleague Kiresh Jahanian and Ned will also be talking. So you'll hear 3 different voices throughout this webinar. And I really want to emphasize what Laura Lee said. We'd love to have questions throughout the webinar, and we will try and pause at moments to answer them as we go along. And if not, we have plenty of time at the end to do questions as well. So as Laura Lee said, we're a national nonprofit organization, and our mission is to build solutions to make people financially secure. We were founded around 18 years ago by actually a Harvard School business professor who felt that we needed new approaches to making wealth possible for everyone, because we really believe that lasting social and economic prosperity for the whole society really requires everyone to have wealth. And we really are in the business of making wealth more common. Thus our name, Commonwealth. Our approach is really to identify financial challenges that are being faced by the financially vulnerable and lower wage workers. We define that as anyone who makes less than the median US income of $55,000. We then, based on those insights from talking to people, build innovative, practical solutions, things that we really think real businesses can implement. And then we partner with firms to see if we're right, to see if in fact our innovations are practical and scalable. When we are found to be brilliant and that our innovations work, we then spread the word through webinars like this and through ongoing partnerships with larger and larger firms across the country. Over the last 18 months, we've been engaged in a project to build financial security in the workplace. Since many people get their income in a workplace, despite all the talk about the gig economy, most people still have an employer where they get their income from. We thought this might be a really interesting place to innovate around helping people to build their financial security. So we started with talking with lots of employees. We then interviewed HR professionals, and we have done some field testing with employers. And so today's webinar will talk a little bit about our findings based on all of that work. And then Ned will talk specifically about the work that Rhino Foods has done on an innovation that they have implemented. So what we've heard as we've talked to people is that building financial security can be incredibly hard and expensive. And what we're here to tell you today that it can both not be hard and not be expensive. And so we hope that you'll agree with us at the end of this presentation. The kind of key component is to really use user-informed communications and really build on your existing infrastructure. No need to add lots of new bells and whistles. you probably already have the infrastructure needed to build your employees' financial security. We'll talk briefly about kind of the impact of financial insecurity in your workplaces. My guess is, and my hope is that all of this will resonate, that you have probably experienced some of these impacts with your workforce. Productivity. One large study found that almost 40% of employees spend at least 3 hours at work dealing with those financial problems, whether it's talking to a credit card company or talking to a mortgage company, or trying to see if they can get the landlord to wait till the first of the month for the rent. And so that adds up in terms of their productivity. Absenteeism, also a big challenge. If someone is worried about their financial security, they are much more likely to be absent from work. And turnover. We hear this over and over again, that financially insecure employees are much more likely to leave their positions. And as we all know, replacing an employee can be super expensive, especially in the tight labor market that we're all experiencing right now. And finally, cognitive overload, which really means that it's really hard to focus on your work when you're worried about whether you have enough food to feed your kids tonight, or whether you can buy that basketball that your child wants so that he can have a new basketball to practice with, or he or she, I should say. And so, in fact, one study of a trucking company found that when their employees were more financially secure, they saw a noticeable decrease in the number of accidents that were preventable. And so it had a direct impact on their bottom line once they helped their employees build their financial security. So we're going to take a quick poll and see which of these do you think impact your business? So go ahead, you should see a poll. You pick multiple choices if you want, if you've seen them all, or if you've seen, I'm going to do this for 30 seconds. So quickly use your mouse or your touchpad, and let's see where we get. And Laura Lee's going to let us know when most people have voted.
Just a few more seconds here. All right, here we go.
Okay, the clear winner at 86% is cognitive overload. So the 29 of you of the 50 that are on the webinar have said that that is the number one issue that you have seen. And then all the others come in close behind at around 62, 66%. So that's great. It always makes me feel better when our research is validated by a live audience. And so you all know exactly what I'm talking about the impact that these kinds of these issues have on your business. Thanks, Laurie. So we've been talking, as I said, for the last 18 months with employers. And this is what we've heard are the big challenges with doing this. The number one challenge I hear over and over again is not enough HR capacity and resources, that the HR team is already strapped with working on all sorts of other issues that their employees have, whether it's hiring, which takes up a lot more time now than it used to, ongoing performance evaluations, issues of salary, administering other benefits, health plans, insurance plans. And so we hear that over and over again from all size companies. I have not yet talked to an HR person who didn't think that they did not have capacity to add something else on. We also hear a lot, both from employees and employers, the concern about privacy, that employers don't want to get into the business of finance. It feels very private. And a lot of employees also feel like they don't want their employers to know about their private financial concerns because they're afraid it's going to impact how they're seen, that somehow they'll be seen as less than if they admit that they have a credit card debt problem or if they are struggling to meet their rent. There's a lot of also confusion around the regulations around some types of financial security. I would imagine everyone on this webinar knows what you can do with your 401k plan, that you can do auto enrollment. Very few people understand what the regulations are around savings, promoting unrestricted savings. And so therefore they're hesitant for good reason to start new programs that they're not clear whether they might get dinged by either state or federal regulators. And finally, we're still early stages in terms of being able to prove that, yes, if you help your employees build financial security, it will improve your bottom line. Everyone I've talked to gets it from a gut perspective. They all kind of agree and shake their heads, just like you all have done in that poll, that this is a problem. But we don't have any hard data yet that I can definitely say, if you do this, it will improve your employees' engagement and therefore your bottom line. We're doing the studies as we speak, but we're just not quite there yet as a field. The other thing I want to kind of, before we go into what we think are good solutions, we talk to lots of employees and we ask them, what do you need and what do you want from your employer? And what we've heard really is this kind of distinction between different levels of financial health. At the most kind of basic level, and if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs from your college days, this pyramid will look familiar. At the very kind of foundational level, people are looking for financial security. They want to know that they can pay their rent, they can feed their kids, they can pay their winter utility bills, they can even have their kids go to summer camp or get them that new pair of sneakers that they want. And that's kind of really the foundational, that everyone needs financial security. The next kind of step up is a sense of financial wellness. That they have slightly longer time horizons, that they're not worrying about this month, which people who are at the kind of financial security are really worried about this month. People who are in a financial wellness feel okay. They feel like, I got this mostly. I can maybe think about next month. I can think about my summer plans. So they have a slightly longer time horizon and are less cognitively kind of focused on the right now. And so they have different benefit needs. And then finally are people who are in a state of financial opportunity, that really, they can really look far in the future. They can think about retirement. They can think about saving for their child's college education. And can think about their future and their kids' future. And we all want all of our employees and all of our people in our society to be at the place of financial opportunity, where really they feel like they can really have prosperity in their lives. And depending on where your employees are, they will require different benefits. So it's really hard for somebody who's at the financial security stage to think about a retirement program. It's out of their cognitive bandwidth to be thinking about that longer term time horizon. As somebody who's at a stage of financial security is really thinking much more about the day-to-day, their credit score, having unrestricted savings, things like that. And people who are kind of financial wellness might be thinking more about planning, so maybe a little bit more about how do you budget, or maybe benefits around reducing expenses, insurance type benefits. So really you need to understand where your employees are at. When we've talked to lower wage workers, again, that's people who make around less than $55,000, the number one concern was saving for emergencies. Lots of people, and I think we are seeing that now in these last few days, are people who are living paycheck to paycheck and can't, in fact, have any money in savings. And that is almost half of the people we spoke to have that as a concern. The next ones are income and expense volatility, and really just paying off everyday expenses. If you look at these issues, most of them fall into the financial security bucket. And so the question is, how can we all as employers help our employees deal with these issues? When we ask about employees directly, what's the impact of financial security on their workplace, around 40% said that they thought being more financially secure would increase their productivity. And about 60% said they thought they would increase their job satisfaction. So good indicators that this might be something you want to do. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kirash, to talk about some practical low-cost solutions to actually help you implement building your employees' financial security.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Melissa. So Commonwealth has partnered with several organizations to pilot strategies around two key moments to build employee financial security. I will discuss these moments and strategies throughout this section. We're still reviewing pilot data, but have plenty of anecdotal evidence to share about what has worked in these pilots. In our piloting experience, we have identified 2 impactful moments when employees are more likely to pay attention to messages and strategies intended to increase their financial security. These moments are at onboarding and when employees receive a raise. So let's take a moment to also fill out another poll, but the first question I want to ask you is how many of you on the webinar have an onboarding program? You should see the poll now. I'll wait about 10 seconds.
Get those last votes in.
All right, so looks like the majority of you who voted have an onboarding program, which is great. So it looks like 19 folks out of, I think that's 27, and then 8 don't, which is okay. But those of you who do have an onboarding program, how many of you thought about onboarding as an opportunity to support your employees' financial security? Another poll, there you go. And just a few more seconds, I'll let Laura Lee keep control of the time here.
Give it just a few more seconds for you guys to get the final votes in. All right.
Oh, so the response is about even. About half and half, those of you who voted, have thought about onboarding as an opportunity to boost employees' financial security, which is great that even half of you are thinking about it. So throughout this section, throughout this part of my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what you can do at onboarding. So one easy way to boost employee financial security is to offer them the opportunity to split a portion of their paycheck into savings. In order to enable this, employers have to make it easy for their employers to set up direct deposit. So Commonwealth conducted a national survey of lower wage workers and found that 33% did not use direct deposit, even though 79% had a checking account. We are currently working on a pilot with a national financial services firm, and in our review of their HR materials, we found that their direct deposit form was hard to understand, and their benefits portal was buried deep in the bottom of the company intranet, making it hard to find. So clearly there was some work to be done to make direct deposits easier to access and easier to use. However, we've also found that some payroll portals don't even offer the option to split deposit at all, which forces employers to have to negotiate with the payroll company to even offer the benefit. So there are a few obstacles potentially making it harder for employees to access direct deposit. But this is an example of a direct deposit form in which easy changes circled in red on this slide can help employees start building emergency savings. Providing a form focused on splitting deposits into savings gets employees to think about taking action to save more. And research has shown that priming employees to contribute specific amounts to their savings accounts per paycheck will typically result in them picking a middle option. But basically what this ends up doing is getting your employees to regularly start saving with every paycheck. And in one of our first small pilots with a janitorial services company in 2017, we asked the company's employees if they were interested in building savings, and they responded positively. As a result, we began developing a savings-focused campaign for the employees, but we pretty soon after that found out that few of them actually had a savings account. To verify if this was the case for lower wage workers generally, we did a smaller scale national survey and found that 46% of lower wage workers did not have a savings account. And every time we've done a pilot since then, we've seen the same story play out in terms of access to savings accounts. So as a result, in a current pilot that we're doing with a national childcare chain, the employer, at our suggestion, has talked to the financial institution it banks with, and employees can now sign up for a savings account online as part of their onboarding. So strategies to boost employee financial security around savings can focus on other savings benefits, including anything that is pre-tax. So for instance, health-related expenses, commuting expenses, or retirement contributions. For lower wage workers, it can be tough to put money aside ahead of time, but there are new innovative approaches to health and commuting expenses that now allow workers to spend eligible expenses, and then the money is automatically deducted pre-tax from their paychecks after the fact. So another opportunity to build employee financial security is during the moment of a raise. So Commonwealth surveyed clients of a New York City-based financial coaching organization in January 2018, and we found that these clients saw a raise as an opportunity to rethink their finances by almost a 2-to-1 margin. Since lower wage workers are more likely to experience financial stress and have multiple demands on their attention, it's important to ensure that the messaging distributed around the moment of a raise is simple and clear. It's also important to connect to employees through a variety of distribution channels, including email, text, posters, or in person. And leveraging the moment of a raise as an easy opportunity to build savings can encourage employees to build a financial cushion and improve their financial security. So which of the following do you think will have a bigger impact on your pocketbook, a $1 per hour raise or $2,000 over a year? There's not a poll to respond to here, but just have that in your mind as I continue talking. But lots of research has found that the framing of communications is very important. So if a raise is presented in the context of a year, you get people thinking in the longer term. But if you talk about the raise in the context of an hour, that can restrict time horizons. So help employees understand the importance of even a small wage increase by underscoring the amount of the raise over months or a year. In other words, make small feel big. One way we at Commonwealth have tried to do this is by creating a raise impact estimator tool. We designed this for the financial coaching agency in New York City that I mentioned before. The tool helps coaches show their clients the impact of their raises over time. So what this estimator shows in this slide is that for someone who works 40 hours per week, a $1.25 per hour raise translates to $50 extra per week, $200 extra per month, and $2,600 extra per year. So in essence, a $1.25 per hour raise for someone who works 40 hours a week translates to $2,600 extra over the course of a year. And then it's important to tie savings suggestion to specific concrete everyday expenses like utility bills or transportation. By doing this, you're making a concept like savings, which can be fairly abstract to some folks, more about the here and now. This is a sample worksheet that aims to help employees articulate how saving an extra $100 would make them feel, and makes saving concrete by providing tangible examples of what to save for, like a child's education, car-related expenses or maintenance, and regular bills like a cell phone plan. Some of these worksheets that you see throughout the presentation are going to be available to you after the webinar. And as we noted before, ensure that your messaging is simple and clear and deliver it through multiple channels, including email, text, posters, or in person. So for example, for a pilot we did with a company in California, we sent text messages and recorded a video that was played on a loop in the break rooms of retail stores across the county about an upcoming wage increase and how they could use it as an opportunity to increase savings. And finally, the same things you talk about or offer at onboarding, like splitting direct deposit into savings, offering access to savings resources, and taking advantage of savings benefits, these are all great things to mention during the moment of a raise. In essence, you're making it a 2-for-1 opportunity to help your employees build their financial security. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Melissa to talk about opportunities for you.
Great, thank you, Kira. So I just want to conclude kind of our part and then pass the mic over to Ned so he can talk about the innovative new benefit that Rhino Foods has implemented with great success. But just to kind of conclude on our part, as you can see, we talk to employees a lot, and we specifically ask them, if your employer offered you a program to help you, how much would that make you stay at your job? And as you can see, more than half of the people said it was highly likely to impact them staying at their job. So that's just kind of one more data point to try and convince you to implement some of these innovations. And I think I hope that you can see that these innovations are not big, new, fancy things that you need to pay more money for. These are really just amping up your existing practices to really help allow them to build your employees' financial security. We, of course, do not know everything about your company, and you know your company best. So you may offer other benefits that make much better sense as a way to to build your employees' financial security. There are some key things we want you to think about as you design your own program. One is that as much as possible, it should be something that's universal. Employees should not have to self-identify as needing financial security help. All sorts of reasons, I'm sure, are obvious. You don't want to kind of single people out. No one feels good to be singled out as somebody who needs help. So as much as possible, you should think about offering universal messaging and benefits on these kinds of issues. As Kairos so eloquently said, easy. We are all super busy. We all have a million things on our minds. So the easier you can make something, the better. And the third element that we like to talk a lot about is fun, right? No one really likes to talk about their financials. No one wants to be thinking budgeting or, oh my God, what bills do I have to pay this week? And it's incredibly important if we can switch that dynamic to being something that is more fun. There's also lots of research that shows that when your brain is not stressed, you are able to make better decisions. So we do that through prizes, through competitions, through gamification, all sorts of ways you can do to try and make these kinds of conversations more fun, to allow people's brains to have some capacity to make these decisions. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Ned to talk about the Income Advance program at Rhino Foods, and then I'll come back and we'll talk more about opportunities for you. Ned.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm just sharing my screen here. Okay. All right. I'm Ned Castle from the Rhino Foods Foundation. And I just want to give you a little bit of background before I get started on Rhino Foods Foundation in relation to the business Rhino Foods. Rhino Foods is a family-owned and operated manufacturer of inclusions for ice cream and other specialty desserts. We're located in Burlington, Vermont. We have just under 200 employees. Our purpose, the business purpose, is to impact the manner in which business is done and be a leader in innovative workplace practices. The foundation comes in around a year and a half ago. The leadership of the business felt like they wanted to be more proactive and deliberate about spreading some of the employee-focused programs at the business, and the foundation was formed to have sort of a separate capacity and resource to provide technical assistance to other businesses that had sort of previously kind of fallen to HR and sort of folks in the business being responsive amidst everything else they had going on. So that's the background on Rhino Foods and the foundation. What brings us to this conversation is the program that we really are focused on spreading as sort of our pilot program, which is the Income Advance program. And we have created some guide resources, some free resources online around spreading that program, and you'll hear a little bit more about those later. Before we jump into the description of the program and details about it, I just want to clarify some terminology. So Income Advance program is what we call essentially the employee-sponsored small dollar loan, which you may have heard through the FINRA Foundation or the Fineline Research Institute pilots. So basically, I just want to clarify that you'll hear me referring to this Income Advance program, but it's essentially an employee-sponsored small dollar loan. Now, the program was designed, invented 10 years ago in response to an individual employee need. And so we like to root the conversation initially in employee stories. So I'm going to play a short video about one of our employees, Paul, who's taken advantage of the loan. And in the story, you're going to hear a little bit about the program. And we have tested this now, and everybody should be able to adjust the volume on their own end. I have put the links to these videos I'm going to show into the chat box. So if you do run into technical difficulties, you can always pull that up or watch it later. So without further ado, I'm going to begin this video.
I see the warehouse as one unit. I see the whole picture of what needs to be done in order to get through a day, a week, a month, even a year.
You want to know something? Go to him.
If I'm assigning the right people to the right task at the right time, everything works perfectly.
They gave him the name Freezer Geezer. If he couldn't go in there freezing at all during the day, he'd be miserable. He'll find something to go in there for.
I'm proud of the nickname Freezer Geezer. It's minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a constant temperature, whether it's 90 degrees outside or 20 degrees outside. With the hustle and bustle and the stress and the phone calls and it's an escape. It literally chills me. Bad joke. Back in 1995, which is about the same year I started working for Rhino, I had made a mistake on my income tax with the IRS. I wasn't in any position at that point to pay that back instantly. Ruined my credit. Could not get a loan even for a stick of bubble gum. I joined the income advance program pretty much at its inception. The only requirement is to be in good standing, and then you're guaranteed. So I borrowed $1,000. It was an emergency. I had to have it. It comes right out of your paycheck every week. You don't have to think about it. After a while, you don't even miss it. Once I was paid, I re-upped and got another $1,000. And I did this about 5 times. I didn't know the impact that would have until I actually went to get a loan for a company. They approved my loan. And I was, to be honest with you, I was shocked. Apparently, my credit score had risen due to the income advance program. The very first new car that I'd ever purchased in my mid-50s, you know? The point that we bought this house, which was a little over a year ago, I had a good idea what my credit rating was. I was a little more hip about credit in general. So I had a good idea that we were going to get the mortgage. My feeling is that my wife had passed. My daughter and my son-in-law couldn't afford a mortgage on their own. It was a perfect marriage. I get to live with my daughter and my granddaughters, and I've got this beautiful place. I gotta think that it's critical for a lot of people. You have an emergency, you don't know where to turn, this is where you should go. It's just human nature, I think. It works.
So that's Paul, and we like to start with sort of a human story because oftentimes and understandably we're talking about statistics and looking at numbers, and for us it really roots the conversation with a personal experience. So thank you, Paul, for sharing that with us. All right, so money is the #1 stress. It's why people are late, it's why good employees end up leaving, it's why they don't bring their best selves to work. And it's shocking how few Americans have savings to deal with relatively minor cash emergencies. So 47% of Americans could not afford an unexpected expense of $400. In addition, 67% of workers making between $50,000 and $100,000 would have difficulty coming up with $1,000 to cover an unexpected bill. So that emergency savings stress is real. For this next piece, excuse me. For this next piece, I'd like everybody to take a moment to think about this question and actually enter some responses into the chat. What are the ways people with no emergency savings can get $500? So let's spend 30 seconds, 45 seconds here. If folks can enter some responses into the chat box, we'll sort of see where folks' thinking is on this. Payday loans, payday loans. Pawn credit. Credit cards. Relatives, family, that's a big one. So I'm going to go to this next slide here, which is a compilation of some of the responses we've gotten when we've done this in the past. And so you see a lot of the things on here that you all mentioned. And one we do want to highlight, which came sort of flying out of the gates there at the beginning of the chat, was payday loans. And a stat that I like to quote, oh, excuse me here, folks. Is according to research conducted by the Pew Charitable Trust and the Center for Financial Services Innovation, more than 12 million Americans take out payday loans every year, spending $9 billion on loan fees, which is just a huge amount. And in comparison here, we've got a slide that will show you, if you think about borrowing $500 over 90 days, the comparison of doing it through payday lending versus income advance is $450 versus $22. So this idea of our employees are our most valuable asset is something that a lot of businesses talk about. And we think that income advance is one of the ways where we can sort of put our money where our mouth is. In addition to boosting financial wellness and solving emergencies, it's also an easy way for employees to build credit and encourage savings. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty of how this works, I'm going to give you a brief overview, and then I'm going to show you a film that gets into more specifics. So basically how the program works, an employer partners with a bank or credit union to provide employees income advance loans. As long as an employee meets eligibility requirements of tenure and good standing with their employer, the bank will approve the emergency loan, typically for an amount between $500 and $2,500, and it can be as soon as the same day. Loans are repaid through automatic payroll deduction, and after the loan is repaid, employees can establish or improve their credit and can continue the automatic payroll deductions into savings. Now, to go into more details, I'd like you to hear firsthand from some of the folks that were involved in founding the program and also some of the operational folks in HR at Rhino that work with the program. So again, we're going to play a short video, and that link is in the chat. And otherwise, you can adjust the volume on your end once again.
When we started the program, we weren't trying to start a program. We were actually just trying to help employees out.
I think that was a big learning experience for me, to think that $500 or less than $1,000 might spin someone's life somewhat out of control, or at least be adding a tremendous amount of stress to their life.
It was just really frustrating to have these folks come in to see me, and I can't do much to help them.
And so what we're trying to do with the income advance is reduce this amount of stress for people that have an emergency in their life and they need $500 to $1,000 to get them through, to be able to come to work in good shape and be able to take the normal time it takes to work through some of these financial issues.
I needed to use the income advance loan to pay an unexpectedly high heating bill.
It's not just like a good philanthropic thing to do. It's good business sense.
I was able to access up to $1,000 the same day I inquired about it.
Someone can walk in the door today, and they might walk in the door today and have something going on, and we can actually respond to that. That's, for me, what is really powerful about this.
It was very comforting not having to share exactly what I needed it for in the moment.
We were about 65% retention. We're now in the 85 to 88% range consistently, which for manufacturing is phenomenal.
I got that money that day, paid my bill, and had no issues moving forward.
Probably the only other department that's as happy as I am about this is the finance department. Because before, the employees would come to HR and say, I need an advance on my pay.
Employers shouldn't be responsible for providing loans to their staff. That's not their expertise.
Now it's like, come on in, let's get this stuff taken care of. Let's get you living your best life.
Income Advance works in 7 simple steps. Step 1, an employee need is surfaced and they are directed to HR. Step 2, they fill out a brief application which scans for eligibility. Step 3, HR notifies the bank for enrollment. Step 4, the employee completes a loan application for the bank. Step 5, the funds are dispersed to the employee as soon as that day. Step 6, loan repayment is set up through paycheck auto deduction. Step 7. After repayment, the auto deductions continue into a savings account unless the employee opts out. It's that simple.
So certainly the income advance, you can hear a lot about how it helps in emergency situations. The other thing, now that we've been doing this 8 years, is the long-term impact.
The HR department keeps making those deposits into a savings account unless the employee requests otherwise. So I also had some savings built up.
We have been able to have borrowers come in and get credit cards after this. They've been able to get auto loans. They've been able to buy homes.
I'm a big one for believing you want to start at home. We have this company called Rhino Foods, and I really want to impact these 180 people. And then my next passion is saying, why don't we try to spread this nationwide?
This is the simplest thing that you can do that will have the biggest return for your business.
To borrow a slogan, just do it. You will never find an easier, more effective tool in the HR world. I promise you. A very simple process that has huge benefits and huge impacts on your employees, and they're all positive. It's going to be better for you as HR, it's going to be better for the employee, and it's definitely going to be better for the business. Do it.
So you saw in there reference to these 7 simple steps. We're not going to go into these in detail, but this is a graphic from the guide. It's sort of our attempt to lay this out really easily for folks that are interested in implementing. We estimate that it takes about 30 days. If you really put a nose to the grindstone on this, you could set a program up in 30 days. And so going back to what we heard in the earlier part of the presentation, making it easy, we feel that this is easy. At Rhino, just a quick snapshot. We pioneered this in 2007, and in 11 years, working with North Country Federal Credit Union and Jeff, who you heard speaking in that video. We've loaned out over $463,000 to 504 employees. That increase in retention is actually something that is really valuable to our bottom line. You heard Lori speaking about that in the video. The impact on retention is huge for us. So that brings us to some of the resources that we have. So we've worked with B Lab, who's the entity behind the B Corp movement, to create what we call the Income Advance Guide. And essentially the guide is an free online platform that takes you step by step through the implementation of this program in 3 phases. And so you will have activities, there's information, there's handouts, there's also tutorials from folks that were involved in setting up the program to really, if you wanted, log on to this platform and teach yourself how to do that. Finally, here's just some reference materials. The free guide and online resources are available at incomeadvance.org. My contact information, which I'm sure will be sent in a follow-up. And at this point, I'm going to turn it, I believe, back to Laura Lee, or Melissa, are you taking back over?
I'm going to take it back over. Thanks so much, Ned.
Thank you.
Yes, and I will. Thank you, Ned, for that great presentation. It's such an interesting program, and it has really a proven success rate. So we're excited to share the news with everyone. Just share my screen again. One second. As we've already talked about, here's some ways to design your own thing, but I wanted to talk a little bit. Give me 1 second. There we go. Some action steps for you, and we just as a way to introduce all of us talking about action steps based on this and answer. I know there's some questions that I saw in the chat and the Q&A, and I'll have Laura Lee in a second walk us through those questions. But there's some really simple practical things that we hope that you can think about doing in the next few months. Look to see how many people are already doing direct or split deposits. See if that's an area of improvement in your organization. Ask the financial institution you bank with if they have a savings product that your employees could sign up for. That worked with this national childcare agency that we're working with. And their bank was like, sure, you're a great customer. We'd love to help. Again, like we talked about, review your onboarding practices to see if split deposit is easy. If you have a payroll provider or an HR system that's online, ask them to make it easier for your employees to split deposit. We believe strongly that every employee is perhaps a little different in your workplace, and your geography might be different. So ask them, what are their financial challenges? What help would they like? And then next time you implement a raise, think about doing it differently. Think about promoting it in different ways. And finally, go to Ned's website, incomeadvance.org, to find out how you might be able to implement this at your business. We here at Commonwealth are happy to support you in ways that would be helpful as well. And at the end of this, you'll get our emails, and we're always happy to talk to folks. Laura Lee, do you want to take it over and let us know what questions people have for us?
Sure. And we've got some questions still coming in. So I'll start with some that came in a little earlier in the presentation. So first, for Melissa and Kiresh, have you studied employees' perception of financial insecurity versus which companies are paying a living wage or not?
That is a great question. We are actually this week fielding a national survey on exactly that question, where we're going to be asking people at a whole range of income levels, all the way from minimum wage to living wage across the country, to see if there's actually any difference in terms of their ability both to feel financially secure and also to start saving or do other kind of changes in their financial behaviors. It's a really interesting question around when does someone feel financially secure? Our research to date has found that it's sometimes related to hard things like hourly wages, but it's also much deeper kind of psychological issues around what makes someone feel secure. So we're really looking forward to, at the beginning of March, having the results of this national survey that we're doing.
Excellent. And let's see, I'm going to try to combine a couple of these questions. So there's a question from somebody about have employees been surveyed to determine the most frequent reasons for needing an income advance? But I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in the presentation. So when we share the presentation, you should be able to go back and see that. And saving for emergencies was the top need, I believe. So there is a question about, that's an important finding. What, if anything, do you know about these emergencies that people want to be more prepared for? How big of a financial impact? What are they? How often are they coming up?
Yeah, I think in not just this work that we've done, but broadly across a lot of the different projects that we work on at Commonwealth, one of the key things that comes up in terms of like emergency expenses is anything housing related. So rent, there are cases where people do fall behind on rent and they need a infusion immediately so that they actually can keep their home, or they will be evacuated. There's also utility bills that come up. There was the example from the Rhino Foods video of having an unexpectedly high heating bill and needing money immediately to be able to pay for it. So that's hugely important. Also, like home repairs come into play, like a broken faucet or anything else that's housing related in terms of like a home repair also can come up. Also, another big issue that does come up is transportation access. So if someone relies on a car to get to work and their car, something happens to it, like a tire blows out or something happens to the engine, so on and so forth, that stops them from actually accessing economic opportunities like their jobs or going to the bank. It just makes mobility a lot more challenging. So that's another huge problem that does come up. And then, of course, medical expenses, unexpected health emergencies can be a huge issue for folks, and not just for themselves, but for their child, for their parent, for a parent, for a partner. All of it, that's another key emergency expense that does arise for folks. In terms of the impact, it depends, of course, but generally, with any housing-related expense, especially when it comes to rent or utilities, you're at risk of losing your place. With utilities, you're at risk of having a utility shut off. And then if you have a repair that needs to happen, you can't use that thing until it's repaired. So it has a true impact on quality of life. And with anything that would happen to someone who relies on a car, that's hugely impactful in that they have to probably take sick days to try to address their car-related emergency, or they have to try a variety of other ways of getting to work, like carpooling. But if the carpool doesn't work out, then they're kind of stuck in the place where they were before. And then medical emergencies, they just got to do what they got to do to pay for it. Just all of which is very challenging, and that can have a really big impact on people's lives.
And I'm just gonna, in terms of medical expenses, that is a growing concern, especially for people with high deductible health plans or people who have no health insurance. And we're in fact doing a webinar all about that next week. So if you are interested in health insurance, happy to talk next week about that. In terms of the size of the emergency, it really can be as small as a couple of $100s, can have a really negative impact on people. So we've seen requests in our work of anywhere from like $200 up to $1,000 is kind of the range of the types of emergency expenses that we've seen.
Great. Thank you. Ned, a couple questions for you, and I'd love for you to answer these out loud for everyone. A couple questions around the eligibility requirement. It sounds like the minimum is 60 days of being employed by the company. And then how does this program help people build their credit? Is there coaching on repaying the loan? Sort of some of those longer term impacts for the employees, if you could speak a little bit to those.
Sure. Well, I'll step back first and say that one of the key aspects to getting this program up and running is developing a partnership with a financial institution. We have resources to support you doing that, but essentially right now it amounts to approaching a local institution and sort of negotiating some of these terms to come up with something that works for the business and the bank. And so we have our sort of standard, which is, as you said, 60 days, 10-year, no corrective action, and also things like a minimum of $50 auto deduction is the minimum payback for the loan period. So if employees want to deduct more than that, they can out of each pay period, but the minimum for payback is about is $50, and so amounts to about a 6-month term. Let me see, did I answer all of them?
Yes. Another one that just came in, is the business a cosigner on the loan?
No, that's what's really key about the program is that once that agreement's been reached with the bank, and we have a model for that agreement based on our work in Vermont, the bank assumes all of the risk. And you, if you watch some of the other tutorials and resources on our website, you'll hear from Jeff talking about their rationale for that. And the quick answer is that to them, it's really dollars and cents. At any given time, they don't have a lot of these loans on their books. And because folks are stably employed, really the only way that they don't get the loans repaid is if somebody terminates employment. And if that's the case, the bank will attempt to sort of set up a new form of repayment. And if they aren't able to, they just write it off. So that sort of cost to carrying the risk is built into the process. And I should say that the interest rate, which I think flashed on one of the slides, but I'll highlight here, is 16%. So it's definitely a higher rate than some other forms of credit, but it's also a lot lower than some of the alternatives.
Mm-hmm. And how about the interest rate to Rhino Foods, or what kind of costs or fees are incurred by the company?
Again, it'll be a case-by-case basis, but in our case with North Country Federal Credit Union, we pay a nominal annual fee that's under $1,000, I believe, just to sort of support the program and offset some of the costs that North Country incurs, either operationally or through those write-offs.
Great. And then two quick questions still for Ned, and then if you have any other questions for Melissa and Kiresh, please get those in. We're coming towards the end. But Ned, what access does the Income Advance program have to employee info from HR?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, so the Income Advance program, do they have access to any employee data or information from the HR department?
In our case, the bank doesn't have any access. The only access that the bank has to HR is the sort of application that you saw in that animation. An employee will come into HR, fill out a screening that basically ascertains those eligibility requirements, and that gets sent. And then the payroll auto deduction information would be through direct deposit, so they'd have access to that. But there are some other online fintech tools that work in a similar way, providing this sort of banking tool that plug right into the HR sort of platforms. The model that we use in Vermont doesn't do that. Those other options are also good options. It's more than I can go into detail about them now, but there are plenty of options for providing the banking portion of this program.
Great, excellent, thank you. And how many people transition to the savings program? Do you find that the majority of people stay with it, or do they opt, because they're automatically transitioned to the savings program, right? And they have to choose to opt out?
Yeah, I wish, you know what, I apologize to everyone. I don't have that number in front of me, but it's high. It's usually that people are transitioning or just keeping it going.
Cool, great. One last question for Commonwealth. We talked a lot about onboarding. Do you find that these types of programs or conversations are helpful in recruiting? I know that just finding good talent is sometimes as challenging as retaining that talent. So do you find that this is helpful in through the recruiting process as well?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, I know when I do recruitment, and I'm recruiting for 2 people right now, if anyone's looking for a job, you got to say everyone these days. Yeah, I often talk about benefits, absolutely. And so I think just as you probably talk about your other benefits, talking about your financial security benefit and showing that you care. That's a huge recruitment tool in my experience in doing recruitment. If you can show that you're an employer that cares about their employees, and so we do make it easy to start saving or whatever other, we provide pre-tax benefits like commuting or health savings or whatever benefits you have. Can be a huge asset in recruiting as well. You know, one of the things that I've always thought about is, you know, if you match your retirement contributions for your employee, how about if you match their savings contributions, or they can choose whether they want you to match their savings or match their retirement. For people who are kind of newer in their careers, the thought of having more money to put into liquid savings is huge. And so that might be another way of talking about your benefits.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. So we will share the recording of the presentation in a follow-up, as well as some handouts from Commonwealth. Ned shared the links to those videos, which I will include in follow-up as well. So stay tuned for more information from our end. Thank you to Commonwealth, to Rhino Foods Foundation. This was great. And contact information as well will be in there. So if we didn't get to some of your questions, and you want to keep this conversation going about possibly bringing some of these programs to your company, you'll have the opportunity to follow up with all of our presenters about that. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.